Welcome to Color Me Conscious. We have more in common than difference. Our intention is to explore the intersectionality that unites us and build consciousness about the layers of oppression we all carry.
Color Me Conscious, where consciousness is at the forefront of the discussion about race.
Sorry.
Hello! Welcome to another edition of Color Me Conscious.
I'm Myleka.
And I'm Myra.
And thank you for joining us today.
We have a very special episode here today. We are doing a seminar at one of our local hospitals. Myleka, do you want to tell us more about it?
Yeah, so it's called Allyship Means Action. And today we brought a lot of like-minded allies together to activate them and start talking about the differences between apathy, empathy, and sympathy. And where do you fall in that spectrum? So, join us. Hi! So my name is Myleka Johnson. I am a project analyst in the Vice Dean's office here at ZSFG and the co-host of Color Me Conscious podcast. And
I'm Myra. I am actually a registered nurse at UCSF. I work at the Parnassus campus in adult urology and the surgical procedure clinic. And also I am co-host of Color Me Conscious.
so thank you for having us here at Allyship Means Action. To me, this has been a really special group, a special gathering, and it's really encouraging and exciting every time we get together. And I'm always like ready for the next one. I wonder what we're going to talk about and who's going to show up and how much fun and amazing things are going to come out of it. Sometimes I know that it gets deep, but we know that the subject matter that we're talking about can sometimes be dangerous topics that are triggering for people or whatever that you may feel from talking about it. I just want us all to start from a very centered place, a very open place, and to just kind of take everything that we're going to talk about kind of from that place of I'm an ally and I just want to be activated and I just want to kind of move forward, right, with some action. Okay? So, who listened to the episode? That's a lot of hands. I'm excited. Yeah. I didn't know it was going to be that many people. But so, if you didn't listen to the episode, you can still listen to the episode. It's on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple, Google Play, and also YouTube. Actually, season 1's not on YouTube yet. We're going to put those up. But season 2 is... so season 2 is on YouTube now because we're doing videos to go along. But basically, episode 4 of season 1 is the focus for today. And what we talked about in that episode, it got a little personal. Yep. But also we were really kind of focusing on the intersection of border separations and immigration issues and or kind of it's an and or situation, and police brutality and mass incarceration and abuses against black and brown bodies in America for citizens of the country, right? And how sometimes the media's coverage of those issues, human rights violations and racial injustices, can influence the way people feel about those issues, right? So if we only get our news from Fox News, you might feel one kind of way. If you only get your news from CNN, you may feel a different kind of way. But the way we operate in this country is you have to get your news from somewhere. You have to know what's happening. Facebook isn't always the most reliable place to get your news from. But we also have to know that there are people behind all of those stories. And they have their own biases and they have their own thoughts and their own isms that are often influence the way a story is told and the way coverage is given and how much coverage is given versus how little coverage or how accurate the coverage is, right? That happens a lot.
Yeah. So to provide kind of just a summary of some of the key points from episode 4, the key points were basically talking about changes in the amnesty process at the border for people seeking asylum. Also the deplorable conditions for the treatment of people who've been detained, as well as the media coverage, as Myleka was saying, dictating the variety of levels of empathy and apathy that we all as consumers of information kind of access. And we kind of pose the question of, is it the chicken or the egg? You know, is it that, you know, people have more apathy towards one subject than another because of the media coverage? Or is media coverage a reflection of what people care about? And so we kind of pose more questions than giving any answers in particular, but we do want to use this time in this space. It's such an honor to be here. I wanted to thank everybody for giving us the opportunity to host one of these meetings, because we'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts and perspectives are as well. We'd love to know your reactions and what you guys personally you know, feel, think, reactions, and hopefully we can come up with some sort of actionable step that all of us can do, just to, you know, take actions in our own ways as allies. It might look different for different people in the room, but it'd just be great to have a conversation about it. And so thank you so much for that. I guess the one last point that was kind of salient in the episode was just talking about white privilege and the ways that white privilege, Myleka gives kind of like an anecdotal story about being verbally assaulted and here at SMTH, right? And one of the things that I noticed about that was the level of emotional intelligence that's required of somebody who's being othered to kind of rise to the occasion, essentially, and how that's like an unfair burden on a victim, but also noting that it seems like people who do endorse, you know, white supremacy have low levels of emotional intelligence, and just kind of making that observation as like there's not a lot of like ability to think outside of, you know, ourselves, and how that is a symptom of white privilege. You know, because of white supremacist culture, then as someone who's white, I don't really have to think about what it's like for somebody else, whereas, you know, a person of color or who's othered for other reasons, you know, is going to have to think outside of those boxes.
Right. So let's open it up right now. We are most curious. I'm always curious from listeners, people who have listened to the episodes. What did you think? What do you feel? Did it trigger you? Do you have a comment? What do you think?
I'll jump in first.
Thank you.
Sure.
It really hurts me to think of how much energy Myleka, you and a lot of people of color have to put out to just tolerate the amount of racism that gets thrown at you all the time, right? That as a white woman who doesn't experience that all the time, you know, I've certainly experienced the comments as a woman, and so I know something of what that might be feeling like on a regular basis, to be walking around being harassed and threatened and all of that. But I struggle to know, other than if I'm in the moment there and hearing it and able to like jump in and intervene to sort of create some safety for you or sort of support you. It's hard for me to know like how can I help impact decreasing those experiences here on this campus and just in the world at large. It's a struggle. I feel like it takes very little for people to put the negativity out there, and it can happen in an instant, unexpectedly, and then the opportunity to do anything just disappears. Or, you know, it's people that I'm not going to see on a regular basis. So that frustrates me a lot, and that pains me just hearing your story and knowing that I've seen stuff like that go on here, and like when I see it, I'll jump in, but I know it's happening all the time, and that hurts and angers me. So that was a reaction that I had.
Thank you.
I like the story that you shared. Unfortunately, it was someone that you didn't have to interact with after that. But when it's a person who you work with and you have to then work with them, I think there's a cost with that, because as women of color, or at least my experience as a woman of color, you then feel like if they don't understand what was injurious of what that interaction was, then you are now tasked or burdened. The cost of their privilege is now that you're tasked and burdened with explaining it to them, and you're not entitled to your feelings in that interaction because you now need to become their educator.
And there's that onus that falls on the victim again. Like I was saying, it's like, oh, you've offended me, and now I have to understand you and me at the same time to make it out alive. Like I'm trying to make it through my day,
Right.
but I've got to understand your hurt that's causing you to hurt me, and what does that do to me? And now I've absorbed your hurt and my hurt, right?
And then you have to meet that person where they're at, because you have to assess what level they're at and what kind of verbiage you could use, where they're going to understand things and not.
Especially if you're going to see him tomorrow. I'm going to see you tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, and heaven forbid it's someone with a supervisor position. Heaven forbid it's someone who has a power differential over you, because that's a whole other thing. Like I mentioned that in the story that I told in the episode, is that, you know, this guy could have been a patient. He literally had no shoes on. So we know typically when people present that way, either he just got discharged or he needs to be admitted. But either way, there's something going on there, because you're not taking care of yourself the way that people that are in their right mind take care of themselves and wear shoes. So, but what I'm saying is that, you know, we see that a lot here. We do see that a lot, and at varying levels. There's times where I may have more power than another person, right? So then, for me, the fact that he was standing there with no shoes on, that told me a lot from before he even started speaking. And then I was like, okay, let me approach this with empathy after all that stuff happened. But if he were a man in a white coat, a lab coat, and he did the same thing, would my reaction have been different? Would I have felt different? I don't know. Maybe, probably.
Most likely.
Most likely.
Most likely.
Most likely, because he probably would have had a badge on, and then I could have figured out who he is and like who his supervisor is, and I would have like ran up the flagpole. But that's just me. Everybody doesn't do that. Everybody doesn't do that, right? Some people will just like shut down, or they'll feel so intimidated, or like they don't know what to do, and then you feel lost. And then there's a question of, well, what do I do with this? Where do I put this feeling? You know, and like Hillary's saying, for people that observe things, it's like, what do I do with this? How do I step up as an ally in the situation I'm observing, with the best of intentions, right? But you know, as soon as you step into a tornado, you're going to get hit with some debris. Like, you see it, but you know, and to me, that's the biggest takeaway, like, for the story, is like, if there had been someone else standing there, I would have hoped that they would say something, but if they didn't, that's okay. I mean, it happens.
Well, if they didn't, though, that doubles the negative impact on you, right? Because now you've not only been harassed, but now you've watched somebody else ignore that instance. And it sort of adds to the pain of it, right?
Right.
That you know they didn't step up.
And then if they didn't, because of my level of emotional intelligence, I can already understand that, like, there's probably a lot of barriers in their own mind to stepping up, right? Like you said, I have to assess, well, witness, where are you in your personal development? Like, have you done the unconscious bias training or assessments? Like, maybe you haven't done it. Maybe you don't realize that there is space for you to step in as an ally. Maybe you don't have the language. Maybe you're unaware, especially if the ally is a white person. I think that sometimes there is a barrier for some white people in taking action as an ally, because there's a fear of offending someone, there's a fear of misusing terms, there's a fear of just becoming now the brunt, like, now I'm going to take this on. Am I ready for that? Am I ready to take that on? Am I ready to support a person being attacked in any kind of way? Do I feel equipped? Do I feel completely knowledgeable for that? Those answers vary for every person, whether you're white or not, whether you're a ready ally or not. How you jump in or don't jump in, you know, that's completely up to you. But I think that, like, what we want to do today is just start to think about, when you're in a situation where you are being othered, or you're witnessing othering happening, you're witnessing offenses happening, you need to be able to very quickly identify, am I feeling sympathetic towards the situation? Am I feeling empathetic towards the situation? Or do I feel apathetic? Because I feel like those three things, and you could feel them all at once, you could feel them in sequence, you could feel them again and again as a situation carries on. But how you feel about it is going to dictate what you do or what you don't do. Okay? Any other thoughts before we move on to the next thing? Yes.
Well, and I think, I mean, fundamentally, I think that the point that I want to make sure is really clear is this idea that, and I'm going to actually say Black people in particular, because I think people of color is, you know, obviously there's a person of color and I have an experience, but I think for the purposes of my learning, I'm trying to be intentional about looking at the experience on this campus of Black and African American people in particular. And I think that one of the things that, you know, if you're not, literally, if you're just like walking through, around, listen to conversations, sit in meetings, just go about your business, you are going to be confronted with things that are troubling to you on a daily basis. So as allies or other people of color, when we are discussing this with somebody, it's like you've already edited and not mentioned probably 100 things that affected you over the past week. So if somebody's bringing up one thing, like that's like the tip of the iceberg, right? The whole iceberg underneath the water that's left undiscussed because you just don't have enough energy, you don't have enough time in the day to do all that stuff you just mentioned, right? Do the assessment, check in with the person, you know, like that's just too time consuming and frankly not practical and exhausting. So I just think for those of us who are like trying to be allies and sitting with people who are having these experiences, like whatever they're telling you is only like this much, and whatever emotion they're bringing to it is only this much of what has actually gone on. And so it needs to be handled very deliberately. That's just my personal feelings.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's a
great point.
that's a really salient point. I would also just like to point everyone to the Office of Diversity and Outreach website, because there are a lot of resources, tip sheets, and links to other websites that have suggestions and ways to help. Like, so if you haven't considered going through the program that Hillary went through,
It's the Diversity and Inclusion Certificate Program for UCSF staff. So it's a semester-long cohort model program to teach you a lot about these kinds of issues.
And it basically, at the end of it, you have a certificate that says, I am diverse and inclusive. And that's what it says. It says, and then blank, and you write your name, and then it says, am now diverse and inclusive. That's it.
Put that on the wall.
But that's just a joke, right? But obviously, like, it gives you some of the tools, it gives you some of the language, it gives you some of the permission that you feel is needed to be able to be a more active ally and to be able to kind of bring growth and promotion, right? In your everyday life, because it's not even just at work. We experience this stuff everywhere you go. We all live in a country. We all live in MAGA country, apparently. So there's a lot that you can use and pull from, and I think that we as employees of this institution should take advantage of that. And even if you're a DPH employee, you can go to the website. You can go to the Office of Diversity and Outreach website, just like anybody else. There's no UCSF login required in order for you to take advantage of some of those resources, okay? So, you guys too. Hey, yeah, you guys too. I almost forgot about you. I can't forget the people. Okay, so
I guess I'm curious just from the listeners if there was anything else that you guys wanted to share, maybe any points that you guys didn't necessarily agree with what we were saying, or you know, thought something at all that was like, you know, maybe not, like maybe you didn't like what we're saying, yeah. Or we could have said it a different way.
Are you willing
to
state that?
Well, I know that's hard because it's like on camera and stuff like that. But no, I'm curious because it is kind of, it's a triggering topic, and one of the concerns that I had in recording the episode and putting it out there was we weren't trying to do like a, you know, what's it called, Oppression Olympics here. You know, we're not trying to compare one, you know, the border separations and what's happening there to Black Lives Matter and say one is worse than the other. You know, I know that within our society, especially right now, there's so much of this like division that's just being bred in every single like allyship movement. For example, like the women's movement, and the way that, especially when we talk about racism, it can it can be very triggering, and people can, you know, feel like, well, you know, maybe the enemy of my enemy is my friend in this situation, but we actually can't really work together in all things. And so I just kind of wanted to put it out there and hear what people's thoughts are. Whether you agree or not, you're welcome to totally disagree. If you agree, though, I'd love to know kind of just what your thoughts are about why is there so much, you know, apathy towards permanent family separation when it comes to police brutality and murdering of black bodies compared to what we were seeing, the overwhelming, you know, and rightfully so, indignant outrage about the border separations. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts of why did one garner so much empathy and the other continuously doesn't?
I definitely felt that there's bias toward, you know, that juxtaposition between the Black Lives Matter and police brutality not being covered at the same level as, and not getting the same level of white outrage as the border separations, which merits, I mean, they're equally egregious. And it made me think of a particular police brutality, anti-black racism story that had really moved me a lot, but then I realized there was even bias in that story, which was a story about a 14-year-old black boy, I think it was in Michigan, I'm not sure, in the suburbs, who had missed his bus and walked to school and rang a doorbell in a suburban area, and the homeowner, the wife had like started screaming at him. The husband came out with a shotgun and fired at the little boy, and he ran. Luckily in that case, the cops came and actually helped the boy, and the homeowner actually ended up getting charged and arrested. But I remember being so moved by that story that, you know, that could be my boy and this little, but even the fact that he was like a suburban, and they made a big deal of the fact that his father was serving overseas in the military. You know, it was like, oh, this boy, this black boy is particularly, is deserving of our empathy in this family, and that story did get a fair amount of press, but I thought about all the other black boys that were killed that didn't get as much sympathy as this boy who survived, and just how that story had particularly moved me, because this boy, you know, he's like this beauteous boy with glasses, I don't know, like they just portrayed him as a certain way, like this suburban black boy, like good black boy. And I thought, wow, there was even that story that did get coverage shows our underlying bias about which children merit our.
Well, that also reminds me of the coverage around when the Sikh temple had a terrorist attack in the Midwest, and they kept emphasizing over and over again that Sikhs aren't Muslims.
Yeah. Because that's an important difference.
That was like an important distinction that needed to be made in the broadcasts, but it was repeated over and over again. And it was really like, what the hell? Like,
see, because your certificate, you're able, like, your antennas went off, and they're like, wait a minute. I thought if it was a loss, but it'd be okay. But right, like it's almost like we're at a higher level of development, so you're able to even see it. Whereas I think people who haven't done that work yet, it will go right over their head.
I think there were a lot of people who nodded along and went, oh yeah, they're not even Muslims.
Right.
You know, and don't even.
As if that's justified, right? Like as if, oh, if we go into a mosque and kill a bunch of Muslims, and it's like, wow, we're fighting terrorism.
Like, oh, well, you know, they're Muslims, so, you know, I think, you know, that's part of that narrative that people are so stuck in, and the way we talk about stuff influences how we see things. So it's a very dangerous kind of
looking at the separation of children and parents, because everybody can connect to that on some level, versus I don't know, I'm just guessing, but I don't think it's right. I just think that that's what they're grabbing at, to get the masses to really get enough emotion to get some sort of reaction, versus when a black person is murdered, not everybody, maybe they think, can connect with it for whatever reason, because their own bias of being white themselves or whatever, not a color. And I don't think it's right. I just, I think that the media plays on people's emotions to get a certain opinion, to get a certain reaction. And if that's monetarily wise or more business for that group, then that's what they're gonna play on.
And is it ethical
No, I think it's
to,
totally wrong.
to clickbait people that way,
no,
right?
but you see it everywhere.
It happens all the time.
Facebook, CNN, like everywhere.
Well, it's like that's infotainment and journalism.
Correct.
You're gonna be infotainment, not journalism.
But I think that's why they said the Seek thing, that's like, it's infotainment, it's not, makes no sense.
I would say, yeah, that's an excellent point, and the sensationalism of the visual imagery of children in cages, you know, is something that, you know, it just was really, could just grab people and just be like, what the hell is that? Versus you see another, you know, black mom crying on TV, and you're just like, there's a lot of assumptions that are underlined in who that person was, and, you know, whether or not they really deserve our empathy, unfortunately.
Margaret, what did you have to say?
Yeah.
I agree, that's a great point, but I also think you're giving them too much credit. I think there's a ton of unconscious bias that goes into reporting, right? So it starts from the place of probably mostly white people creating the news and not seeing that the way they're choosing to report something is biased.
Yeah, I feel like they're using their own bias initially to then get what is beneficial for them.
To maintain the power
Exactly.
structure.
Yeah. Did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I think it might be a little unrelated, but you talked a little bit earlier about just how people are at different levels of their work, and how they both hear and respond to the type of discrimination and aggressions, macro and micro, that we see. And it struck me, you know, with Naomi's example, I think, so to me it feels like the example you gave of kind of trying to justify a black boy, that it's like terrible that this black boy was treated like this because of all these reasons. For people who are further along, that is that reaction. Why do we need to justify it? It's a little boy. But it also, I guess the question I have about this is, for people who have not even started this work, the question is, you know, is there benefit actually to bringing a black boy into a realm that people can start being like, whoa, you know, he's a human being, right? And it's not
just
what
like the kid that lives next door to me, except his skin's white.
Exactly. And it's sad that someone would need to think about it like that, but we do recognize, as you said, we seem to be living in a different country than we thought we were. And because of that, I just wonder if there are people that that might actually be the first step. Like, I never considered that a black boy could be so similar to my, right?
Wow, that's a very interesting flip on it. Yeah.
But that is the disconnect that happens a lot, and that comes as a derivative of white privilege, right? So living in a country that's steeped in white supremacy enables white privilege, and the privilege that is given to those that have power or are seen as what's at the top of the heap is that that's not a human being. Right? And if we look back in the history of the country, that's actually property. Right. So I treat my cows the way I do because that's how I do. And whether people acknowledge it or not, that's where it comes from. Right. Whether people are aware consciously in the front of your mind and how you speak and how you behave, whether or not, it's subconscious. And we all have to accept the fact that that's the country that we live in. Whether you were born here or you came here, that's what America is. So make America great again. When? Like when? Because if I know history, then I'm honestly this is the best time it ever was to be black in America. Like right now.
Maybe a couple years it ever was.
Yeah.
I mean, I miss Obama too, but but we gotta, that's another topic. What did you have to say?
So, especially around this issue when it comes to police brutality, I think it's also important to recognize that our experience with the police in our communities is very different.
Oh, yeah.
And so, we're taught, and the assumption is the police are inherently good. And so when you see police brutality, I think many of us still make this assumption that that person must have done something bad. So I think we automatically come from a place of much less
White people do.
White people, yes. Yeah.
When she says we, she means we.
Yeah, sorry.
White people.
But I think some families' kids are taught that
the police, watch out.
Stay away, these are scary people, so this is scary. And so I think when we're talking about, the juxtaposition between our empathy for the border crisis versus our empathy for police brutality, the narrative we're hearing is that these are asylum seekers, these are families coming from, war-torn countries who deserve our sympathy and our efforts. Whereas these people being brutalized by the police, well, if the police are involved, they must have done something wrong to begin with.
One thing I wanted to do too with kind of a juxtaposition is just there's been a lot of MAGA activity in the last few days that has been really detrimental. I mean, from the Jussie Smollett, I mean, that's absolutely horrible, horrific. Thoughts and prayers to him and his family and recuperating, and I hope that those people are held accountable for what they did. But this is also one of many things that they've done, and when you look at the narrative that's portrayed of these, basically teenage and college, college age young, mostly white men. I don't know if you guys saw, there was a viral thing where they had, they were verbally assaulting an elderly indigenous man, and then there was just this entire parade of defending these college students and oh, but they're good kids and blah 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 blah, and it's just very interesting to see the way that a young white man is portrayed in the media when he's clearly assaulting somebody on camera versus when a young black man is actually killed on camera, then where's the people coming to defend his character?
It happens on Black Twitter. It doesn't happen on CNN. It happens. It just happens in the coverage.
Instagram and Black Twitter.
It definitely happens. He gets a hashtag, right? But it doesn't. But maybe it doesn't translate, right? And it doesn't permeate into the consciousness of everyone the same way that because the media coverage is a force. There's a force there. Because as you receive information, especially as for the first time when you receive information, the way it's said, the language matters. The way it's presented to you can actually influence how you even feel about it, right?
I mean, the fact that MAGA is not just being discussed everywhere as a white supremacist hate group,
and that
because that is
terrorism?
What they are. They're domestic terrorists. They're a white supremacist hate group, and they should be held accountable for that. And we should have, I was looking, I went to Southern Poverty Law Center, it's one of the groups that tracks hate groups, and I didn't see as much as I wanted to on them when it came to all of the headlines and stuff. And I just, I personally am thinking of writing a report about it. I was I want to file a report to Southern Poverty Law Center about MAGA, because they were even in San Francisco, Dolores Park, a couple of days ago, advocating about the borders and saying all these inflammatory things about building the wall and anti-immigration. And it reminded me of when I was in college, there was a group, I went to SF State, and there was a group called the College Republicans, and they did very similar things and did just awful hate speech. And to be honest with you, at the time I really didn't know access to the resources, of actually reporting it. But when I graduated, the keynote speaker at San Francisco State was actually the founder of Southern Poverty Law Center. He's also an alumni from San Francisco State. He's an attorney, and the organization, for anybody who's not familiar with it, they actually just go after hate groups and they sue them and they try to bankrupt the leaders, and they've been successful in closing down different chapters of various hate groups. So I think anybody who's interested and has had a MAGA interaction, I implore you to file a complaint, a hate report with Southern Poverty Law Center, because I think that we should go after MAGA.
Thank you for listening. And if we made you think and you'd like to continue the conversation, visit our website, www.colormeconsciouspodcast.com, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Color Me Conscious Podcast.